In the moment the plane plunged into the sea, the distance between the billionaire boss and the logistics staff vanished completely. Cade Mercer awoke amidst the burning wreckage, trapped and on the verge of death, until Alara Voss, the company's most powerful CEO, pulled him from the flames. They survived. But now, stranded on a deserted island in the middle of the ocean, with no laws, no power, only pure survival. And what began as a fight for survival would become something neither of them could control. Follow the story to the end, like, and comment the city you're watching to let me know how far this story has come. The cabin pressure dropped so fast, Cade's ears didn't even have time to pop. 1 second he was reviewing shipment logs on his laptop, the next the entire fuselage was screaming. Oxygen masks dangled like broken puppets. Somewhere behind him, a woman shrieked. The plane pitched forward, and Cade's stomach lurched into his throat as gravity abandoned them entirely. His laptop flew from the tray table and smashed into the seat in front of him. This was it. He thought of his daughter, Emma, 6 years old. Brown curls that never stayed in the ponytail he tried to braid every morning before school. The way she insisted on kissing his cheek 3 times before bed. Never 2, never 4, always 3. She was with his mom this week. Safe. That was the only thing that mattered. The plane tilted violently to the left. Cade grabbed the armrests, knuckles white, and caught a glimpse through the window. Ocean, so much ocean, rushing up to meet them like a fist. Someone screamed his name. He turned. 3 rows up, Alara Voss was gripping her seat, face pale but composed in a way that was almost unnatural. Their eyes met for half a second. She didn't look away. Then the world exploded. Metal shrieked. The impact was a sledgehammer to every bone in his body. Water, freezing, violent, poured through a crack in the fuselage, flooding the cabin in seconds. The lights went out. Cade's seatbelt dug into his chest as the plane flipped, his head smacked against the window. Bright pain bloomed behind his eyes, then darkness swallowed everything. He woke to fire. Not metaphorical fire. Actual flames licking up the side of a shattered seat 3 feet from his face. Smoke filled his lungs, thick and choking. He coughed, tasted copper, realized he was bleeding somewhere. His seatbelt was still on. He fumbled for the buckle, hands shaking, brain sluggish. The cabin was a twisted nightmare of metal and water and bodies. The plane had broken apart. He was in a section that had somehow stayed partially above water, wedged against something, rocks maybe. The fuselage groaned, sinking lower. He got the seatbelt undone and tried to stand. His left ankle screamed, sprained, maybe broken. Didn't matter. He had to move. The water was rising, knee-deep already. The fire was spreading. "Help!" The voice cut through the roar of flames. Female, desperate. Cade twisted, scanning the wreckage. There, pinned beneath a collapsed overhead compartment, soaked and bleeding from a gash on her forehead, was Alara Voss, his boss. The CEO of Meridian Global, the woman who signed his paychecks and had probably never said more than 10 words directly to him in the 2 years he'd worked in logistics. She was trapped. "I can't." Her voice cracked. She yanked at the metal pinning her legs, but it didn't budge. "I can't get out." Cade didn't think. He lurched forward, ignoring the fire in his ankle, and grabbed the edge of the compartment. It was heavier than it looked. He pulled. Nothing. "On 3, he said. Alara stared at him, wide-eyed, then nodded. 1, 2. He didn't wait for 3. He wrenched the compartment up with everything he had, and Alara scrambled backward, gasping. The metal crashed down the second she was clear. "Can you walk?" Cade asked. She tried to stand, stumbled. Her right leg buckled. "I don't—" The plane lurched. The water surged higher, waist deep now. The flames roared louder. "We're leaving," Cade said. "Now." He grabbed her arm, pulled it over his shoulder, and half dragged her toward the gaping hole in the fuselage. The ocean beyond was chaos, waves crashing against jagged metal, debris everywhere, no sign of land. They reached the edge. Cade looked down at the churning water, then at Alara. "Hold your breath," he said. Then he jumped. The ocean swallowed them whole. Cold. So cold it felt like his chest was caving in. Cade kicked hard, dragging Alara with him, fighting the weight of their clothes and the current trying to pull them under. His lungs burned. His legs screamed. He didn't stop kicking. They broke the surface together, gasping. "Swim!" Cade shouted over the roar of the waves. Alara coughed, choking on seawater, but she started moving. Cade scanned the horizon. Wreckage everywhere. Seats, luggage, bodies. He forced himself not to look too closely at the bodies. There, 100 yards away. Land. A strip of white sand, dense jungle beyond. "There!" He pointed. Alara turned her head, saw it, nodded. They swam. It felt like hours, probably 10 minutes. By the time Cade's feet hit sand, he was shaking so hard he could barely stand. He hauled himself onto the beach, turned, and pulled Alara the rest of the way out of the water. They collapsed side by side, gasping, coughing, alive. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the waves and the distant crackle of fire from the wreckage still burning in the water. Alara sat up first. She was soaked, bleeding, her designer blouse torn and streaked with ash. Her hair, usually pulled back in a flawless bun, hung loose and tangled around her face. She looked nothing like the polished CEO who gave quarterly earnings calls. She looked human. "What just happened?" she said quietly. Cade sat up, wincing as his ankle throbbed. "Plane crash." "I know that." Her voice was sharper now. "I mean, where are we? Is anyone else?" She stopped, looked out at the water, at the bodies. Cade followed her gaze. He counted 3, maybe 4. Hard to tell from here. "I don't know," he said. Alara's jaw tightened. She stood, swaying slightly, and scanned the beach. "We need to find survivors." Cade pushed himself up, testing his weight on his bad ankle. It hurt like hell, but it held. "We need to get away from the water first, find shelter, then we can—" "I'm not leaving people to die. I'm not saying we leave them. I'm saying we don't have a choice right now." He gestured at the jungle. "It's going to be dark in a few hours. We need fire, water, something to sleep under. If we don't find that, we're dead too." Alara stared at him. For a second, he thought she was going to argue, but then she exhaled, slow and controlled, and nodded. "Fine," she said. "Lead the way." Eat. The jungle was dense, oppressive, louder than Cade expected. Birds screeched overhead. Insects buzzed in clouds. Every step felt like wading through wet concrete. Cade moved carefully, testing his footing, favoring his good leg. Alara followed close behind, limping but silent. She didn't complain. He'd give her that. They found a clearing about a quarter-mile inland, flat, open, far enough from the beach that the tide wouldn't reach them. A fallen tree provided some cover. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. "Here," Cade said. Alara looked around, then nodded. "Okay." She sat down heavily on the log, wincing. Cade crouched beside her. "Let me see your leg," he said. "It's fine." "Let me see it." She hesitated, then pulled up the hem of her pants. Her right ankle was swollen, already turning purple. Not broken, probably. Bad sprain. Cade exhaled. "You need to stay off it. That's not an option. It's the only option unless you want it to get worse." Alara's eyes flashed. "I'm not sitting here while you do everything." "I didn't say you were. I said stay off it. There's a difference." They stared at each other. Cade could see the war happening behind her eyes. Pride versus logic. Finally, she looked away. "Fine," she muttered. Cade stood. "I'm going to find water. Don't move. I'm not a child." "I know, but you're also not stupid." He glanced at her ankle. "Stay here." He didn't wait for her response. He turned and headed back toward the tree line. It took him an hour to find fresh water. A small stream, barely more than a trickle, cutting through the rocks about half a mile east. Cade filled his hands, drank deep, then splashed his face. The water was cold, clean. It tasted like survival. He made a mental note of the location and headed back. When he reached the clearing, Alara was still sitting on the log. She'd found a stick and was using it to dig a shallow trench around their makeshift camp. Cade raised an eyebrow. "I thought I told you to stay off it." "You did." She didn't look up. I didn't listen. Clearly. She stabbed the stick into the ground. I'm not useless, Mercer. I never said you were. You didn't have to. She finally looked at him, and there was something raw in her expression, something almost defensive. I run a company. I make decisions that affect thousands of people. I don't just sit around and wait for someone else to fix things. Cade crouched beside her. I know, but this isn't a boardroom, and you can't negotiate with a sprained ankle. If it gets worse, you're a liability for both of us. Alara's jaw tightened. A liability. Yeah. That's what you think of me. That's what I think of anyone who can't walk. He met her eyes. This isn't personal. It's survival. She held his gaze for a long moment, then slowly she nodded. There's water, Cade said, standing. About half a mile that way. I'll bring some back. But we need fire first. And food. How do we get fire? I don't know yet. Alara almost smiled. Great. They didn't get fire that night. Cade tried. He found dry leaves, bark, sticks. He rubbed them together until his hands blistered. Nothing. Alara watched him, silent, and when he finally gave up, she didn't say anything. She just handed him a piece of fabric she'd torn from her blouse. For your hands, she said. He took it. Thanks. They sat in the dark, backs against the fallen tree, listening to the jungle. The temperature dropped. Cade's wet clothes clung to his skin, cold and clammy. He shivered. Beside him, Alara shifted closer. Not touching, but close enough that he could feel the faint warmth of her body. Your daughter, she said quietly. Cade's head turned. What? You have a daughter, Emma, 6 years old. He stared at her. How do you... You keep a picture of her on your desk. I've walked past it 100 times. Cade didn't know what to say to that. The idea of Alara Voss noticing anything about his desk felt surreal. She's with my mom, he said finally. For the week. That's good. Yeah. Silence stretched between them. Then Alara said, She'll be okay. I know. You'll see her again. Cade closed his eyes. He wanted to believe that. He had to believe that. Yeah, he said. I will. Ota. The next morning, Cade woke to the sound of rain. Not a drizzle, a downpour. Water streamed through the gaps in the foliage above, soaking everything. Alara was already awake, sitting up, her arms wrapped around her knees. She looked exhausted. How long has it been raining? Cade asked. An hour, maybe more. He cursed under his breath and stood. His ankle still hurt, but it was manageable. He scanned the clearing. The trench Alara had dug was already overflowing. We need better shelter, he said. No argument here. They worked together, moving slowly, gathering branches and palm fronds to build a lean-to against the fallen tree. Alara's ankle slowed her down, but she didn't quit. She carried what she could, braced herself when she had to, and kept moving. By the time they finished, they were both drenched and exhausted. But the lean-to held. It wasn't pretty, but it kept most of the rain off. They sat underneath it, shoulder to shoulder, and waited for the storm to pass. I hate this, Alara said suddenly. Cade glanced at her. Which part? All of it. She gestured vaguely at the jungle. Being helpless, not knowing what's happening, not being able to do anything. You're not helpless. I'm sitting in the dirt with a sprained ankle while you build us a shelter. That's the definition of helpless. You helped. Barely. Cade was quiet for a moment. Then he said, You pulled yourself out of a burning plane. You swam through open ocean. You're still here. That's not helpless. Alara looked at him, really looked at him. For the first time since the crash, her expression softened. You don't talk much, do you? She said. Not usually. Why not? Don't have much to say. She almost smiled. Fair enough. The rain kept falling. Cade closed his eyes, listening to the rhythm of it against the fronds above. He was tired. So tired. But he couldn't sleep. Not yet. Mercer, Alara said. Yeah? Thank you. For getting me out? He opened his eyes. She was staring straight ahead, not looking at him, but her voice was steady. You don't have to thank me, Cade said. Yes, I do. They sat in silence after that. And for the first time since the crash, Cade felt something other than fear. He felt hope. By the third day, they had fire. Cade managed it with a piece of glass from the wreckage, part of a shattered phone screen he'd found washed up on the beach. He angled it to catch the sun, focused the light on a pile of dry bark, and waited. It took 20 minutes. But when the smoke started to curl and the first tiny flame sparked to life, Alara actually laughed. You did it, she said. Cade grinned. Damn right I did. They fed the fire carefully, adding twigs and leaves until it was strong enough to sustain itself. Then Cade went back to the stream and filled a hollow coconut shell with water. They boiled it over the fire, waited for it to cool, and drank. It tasted like victory. We need food, Alara said, staring into the flames. I know. What do we have? Coconuts. Some kind of fruit I found yesterday. Might be edible. Fish, if we can figure out how to catch them. Alara nodded slowly. I used to fish when I was a kid. But Cade raised an eyebrow. Seriously? My dad took me before he... She stopped, shook her head. It was a long time ago. Cade didn't push. He just said, Think you remember how? Maybe. Then let's try. They spent the rest of the day on the beach. Cade carved a crude spear from a branch, while Alara waded into the shallows, watching the water. She moved carefully, balancing on her good leg, her eyes sharp. There, she said suddenly, pointing. Cade looked. A small fish darted through the clear water near her feet. Alara lunged, missed. The fish disappeared. She tried again, and again. By the 10th attempt, Cade could see the frustration building in her shoulders. Take your time, he said. I'm taking my time. No, you're rushing. She turned to glare at him. I know what I'm doing. Clearly. She opened her mouth to argue, then stopped, exhaled, turned back to the water. The next fish that came by, she waited, watched it circle, didn't move until it was right in front of her. Then she struck. The spear went clean through. She lifted it, dripping, and held up the fish triumphantly. See? She said, breathless. I told you. Cade couldn't help it. He laughed. Alara stared at him, then started laughing too. It was the first real laugh either of them had managed since the crash, and it felt absurdly good. They cooked the fish over the fire that night. It was small, barely enough for one person, let alone two, but they split it down the middle and ate every bite. Best meal I've ever had, Alara said. Cade smiled. Liar. I'm serious. I've eaten at Michelin-starred restaurants. This is better. You're delirious. Maybe. She leaned back against the log, staring up at the stars. But I mean it. Cade didn't argue. He just sat beside her and watched the fire burn. On the 5th day, they found the supply cache. It was buried in the sand near the wreckage, 6 waterproof containers that had washed ashore. Inside, first aid supplies, a flare gun, 3 bottles of water, energy bars, a tarp, and a small radio. Cade held up the radio. Think it works? Alara took it, turned it over in her hands. Battery's probably dead. She tried it anyway. Static crackled through the speaker, faint but there. Holy shit, Cade said. Alara adjusted the dial. The static shifted, broke apart, reformed. No voices, no signal. But it was something. We can try again tomorrow, she said. Maybe we'll pick up something. Maybe. They packed everything else into the tarp and carried it back to camp. The first aid kit had bandages, antiseptic, painkillers. Cade wrapped Alara's ankle properly for the first time. She didn't complain, but he could see the relief in her face. That night, they ate energy bars and drank bottled water and felt almost human again. How long do you think we have? Alara asked. Cade looked at the supplies. A week, maybe 2 if we're careful. And then? Then we're back to fish and coconuts. Alara nodded. She didn't look scared, just tired. Do you think anyone's looking for us? She asked quietly. Yeah, I do. How do you know? Because you're worth a lot of money, and I've got a daughter who needs me. He met her eyes. People are looking. Alara held his gaze. You really believe that? I have to. She nodded slowly. Okay. Okay? Yeah. Okay. She leaned back, staring up at the sky. Then we keep going. Cade smiled faintly. Yeah, we do. The days blurred together after that. They fell into a routine. Wake up, check the radio, gather food, maintain the fire. Sleep. Repeat. Cade's ankle healed enough that he could walk without limping. Alara's swelling went down. They learned which fruits were safe, which fish were easiest to catch, which parts of the island were best for fresh water. They also learned each other. Cade discovered that Alara hated mornings, that she hummed when she was focused, that she'd been married once but didn't like to talk about it. Alara learned that Cade's daughter was obsessed with dinosaurs, that he'd been a Marine before logistics, that he couldn't stand the taste of coconut but ate it anyway because there wasn't much choice. They argued sometimes. Over stupid things, how to build the fire, where to set the fish traps, whether the radio was worth the effort. But the arguments never lasted. They couldn't afford to. And slowly, something shifted. It started small. A hand on his shoulder when he was frustrated. A quiet, "You okay?" when she caught him staring at the horizon. Moments where the walls they'd both built came down just a little. One night, Cade found her sitting by the fire, staring into the flames, her face unreadable. "You all right?" he asked. She didn't answer right away, then quietly, "Do you ever feel like you're running out of time?" Cade sat down beside her. "What do you mean?" "I don't know. She stopped, started again. "I spent my whole life building something. The company, my reputation. I thought if I worked hard enough, if I controlled enough, I could make everything secure, safe. And now? Now I'm sitting on a deserted island, and none of it matters." She looked at him. "It's all gone, and I don't even know if I care." Cade was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Maybe that's not a bad thing." Alara frowned. "What?" "Maybe it's okay to let go, just for a little while." She stared at him. "You really believe that?" "I don't know. But I think if we spend all our time worrying about what we lost, we're going to miss what's right in front of us." Alara's eyes softened. "And what's that?" "This, right now." He gestured at the fire, the camp, the sky. "We're alive. That's enough." She didn't say anything, but she leaned her head against his shoulder just for a second, and Cade felt something in his chest crack open. The storm hit on the 14th day. It came out of nowhere. Black clouds rolling in from the horizon, wind whipping through the trees like a living thing. Cade and Alara barely had time to grab their supplies before the rain started. It wasn't like the earlier storms. This was different, violent. The wind tore through the lean-to, shredded it in seconds. The fire died instantly. The world turned into a roaring wall of water and sound. "Cave!" Cade shouted over the wind. "We need to find cover." Alara grabbed his arm, and they ran. Stumbling, slipping, half blind in the rain. Cade spotted a rocky outcropping 100 yards ahead, a dark opening in the stone. He pointed and they sprinted toward it. They made it inside just as the wind reached its peak. The cave was shallow, barely deep enough to keep the rain out, but it was better than nothing. They collapsed against the back wall, gasping, soaked to the bone. Outside, the storm raged. Alara was shaking. Cade pulled the tarp from their supplies and wrapped it around both of them, huddling close for warmth. "We're okay," he said. "We're okay." But Alara didn't answer. She just pressed her face into his shoulder and held on. The storm lasted for hours, maybe all night. Cade couldn't tell. All he knew was the sound of rain and wind and Alara's breathing, unsteady and shallow, against his chest. When the worst of it finally passed, the silence was almost deafening. Cade pulled back, just enough to see her face. "You all right?" Alara didn't look at him. She just said very quietly, "I don't know how much longer I can do this." "You're doing fine." "No, I'm not." Her voice cracked. "I keep telling myself I'm fine, that I can handle this, but I—" She stopped, took a shaky breath. "I'm scared." Cade didn't say anything. He just waited. I'm not scared of dying, Alara continued. I'm scared of losing everything, of being nothing, of all of this, everything I built, everything I fought for, just disappearing. It won't. You don't know that. No, but I know you. He met her eyes. And you're stronger than you think. Alara stared at him. Her eyes were wet, but not from the rain. What if we never get off this island? She whispered. What if this is it? Cade's chest tightened. He thought about Emma, about home, about everything he'd left behind. Then he looked at Alara, really looked at her, and he made a choice. Then we make it work, he said. Together. Her breath hitched. You mean that? Yeah, I do. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Alara leaned forward, slow and deliberate, and kissed him. It wasn't desperate, wasn't frantic. It was quiet, careful, real. When she pulled back, her eyes were still wet, but she was smiling. Okay, she said softly. Okay? Yeah. She rested her forehead against his. Okay. Outside, the storm finally broke, and for the first time since the crash, Cade felt like maybe, just maybe, they were going to be all right. Part 2 lưu ý, viết 7.000 đến 7.500 từ liên kết liền mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện và hội thoại tạo thành một câu chuyện liền mạch khi ghép lại. Mỗi phần liền mạch với phần trước không giới thiệu lại câu chuyện ở đầu phần mới, liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liền mạch. Sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần, duy trì chủ đề, tránh ngắt quãng đột ngột, không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng hoặc tiêu đề phụ, phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ, Hoa Kỳ, giống văn giàu cảm xúc, kể theo ngôi thứ 3, giữ đồ kịch tính không viết lan man, nhân vật không hoàn hảo, hội thoại tự nhiên, tránh ngôn ngữ văn chương sáo rơi và cụm từ AI điển hình. Viết như nhà văn chuyên nghiệp, không như AI cố gắng nghe sang. Có yếu tố con người, cấm miêu tả qua mượt mà và hoàn hảo, kết thúc phần không giới thiệu phần sau, câu chuyện không nhắc đến Chúa. Lưu ý trả lời trong mục tin nhắn không nhảy sang document, chi đàn bắt buộc, không được xuất hiện trong nội dung truyền. Đây là một câu chuyện điện ảnh hoàn toàn hư cấu được tạo ra chỉ nhằm mục đích giải trí. Không đề cập hay ngụ ý rằng nó dựa trên sự kiện có thật, người thật hoặc câu chuyện có thật. Không sử dụng các cụm từ như dựa trên một câu chuyện có thật, theo ghi chép hoặc bất cứ điều gì tương tự. Tất cả các nhân vật, địa điểm, tổ chức và sự kiện phải hoàn toàn hư cấu. Showmore 844, Part 2. When morning came, the island looked like a war zone. Cade stepped out of the cave first, blinking against the harsh sunlight. Branches were scattered everywhere, torn from trees and flung across the beach like broken bones. Their lean-to was gone, completely destroyed. The fire pit they'd worked so hard to build was flooded, filled with muddy water and debris. Alara emerged behind him, limping slightly. Her ankle had stiffened overnight. She surveyed the wreckage without saying anything, her jaw tight. Well, she said finally, that's going to take a while to fix. Cade almost laughed. Almost. Yeah, just a bit. They stood there for a moment, side by side, staring at the mess. Then Alara turned to him. Last night, she started, we don't have to talk about it. I want to. Cade met her eyes. There was something different in them now, less guarded, less afraid. Okay, he said. I meant what I said, about being scared. She crossed her arms, not defensively, just holding herself together. But I also meant what I did. The kiss, She stopped, started again. I don't regret it. Cade felt something warm settle in his chest. Good, because I don't either. A small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. So where does that leave us? Alive, on an island, trying not to die. He gestured at the destroyed camp. Same as yesterday, just different. Different how? I don't know yet. He looked at her, really looked at her. But I guess we'll figure it out. Alara nodded slowly. Yeah, I guess we will. They didn't say anything else. They didn't need to. They just got to work. Rebuilding took 3 days. Cade salvaged what he could from the wreckage. Pieces of tarp, usable branches, a few supplies that hadn't been washed away. Alara worked beside him, slower than before because of her ankle, but determined. She refused to sit still, refused to be useless. You're going to make it worse, Cade said, watching her drag a fallen palm frond toward their new fire pit. Probably. Then stop. No, he sighed. You're stubborn as hell, you know that? She dropped the frond and turned to face him, hands on her hips. You say that like it's a bad thing. It is when you can't walk tomorrow. I'll deal with tomorrow when it gets here. Cade shook his head, but he didn't argue. He'd learned by now that arguing with Alara Voss was like arguing with a hurricane. You could brace yourself, but you weren't going to change its direction. By the third day, they had a new shelter, sturdier this time, built low to the ground with a framework of thick branches lashed together with vines. It wasn't pretty, but it would hold. The fire was going again, too. Cade had managed to keep a few embers alive in a coconut shell during the storm, and he'd coaxed them back to life with dry bark he'd found tucked under a rocky overhang. That night, they sat by the fire and ate roasted fish. Alara had caught 2 that afternoon, bigger than usual, enough to actually fill their stomachs. I'm getting good at this, she said, tearing off a piece of flesh with her fingers. You are. Don't sound so surprised. I'm not, just impressed. She glanced at him, eyebrow raised. You didn't think I could do it, did you, when we first got here? Cade considered lying, decided against it. No, I didn't. Why not? Because you're a CEO. You spend your days in boardrooms and conference calls. I didn't think you'd know how to survive out here. And now? Now I know better. Alara smiled, just a little. Good. They ate in silence for a while. The fire crackled. Somewhere in the jungle, something howled, a sound Cade still couldn't identify even after 2 weeks. He'd stopped trying. Can I ask you something? Alara said eventually. Yeah. Why'd you become a Marine? Cade blinked. He hadn't expected that. Why do you want to know? Because you don't talk about it, but I can tell it still matters to you. He set down the fish, wiped his hands on his pants. I was 18. Didn't know what else to do. My dad was gone. My mom was working 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. I figured the military would give me structure, purpose, something to aim at. Did it? For a while. He stared into the flames. Then I got deployed, saw some things, did some things, came back different. Different how? Cade didn't answer right away. He didn't like thinking about those years. Didn't like the way they still sat in his chest like stones. I stopped believing in easy answers, he said finally. Stopped thinking the world was black and white. It's all just gray, messy, complicated. Alara nodded slowly. I get that. Do you? Yeah. Running a company isn't that different. Everyone wants you to have all the answers, to know exactly what to do. But most of the time, you're just guessing, making the best call you can with incomplete information and hoping it doesn't blow up in your face. Cade looked at her. That sounds exhausting. It is. She smiled faintly. But I was good at it. Was. I don't know anymore. She picked at the fish, not eating. Out here, none of that matters. The deals I close, the strategy meetings, the quarterly reports, it's all just noise. And the weird thing is, I don't miss it. Not even a little. Not as much as I thought I would. She met his eyes. Is that bad? No. I think it just means you're human. Alara laughed, short and sharp. I've been called a lot of things. Human wasn't usually one of them. Then they didn't know you. She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she leaned forward, slow and deliberate, and kissed him again. This time, it lasted longer. This time, Cade didn't pull away. When they finally broke apart, Alara rested her forehead against his, her breath warm against his skin. This is insane, she whispered. Yeah. We could die out here. I know. And you're still okay with this? Cade pulled back just enough to see her face. Are you? She smiled. Yeah, I think I am. The days that followed were different, not easier. The island was still brutal, the heat, the insects, the constant effort just to survive. But something had shifted between them. They moved around each other with an easy familiarity now, anticipating each other's needs without having to ask. Cade learned the way Alara's face changed when her ankle was hurting, but she didn't want to admit it. Alara learned when Cade needed space, when the silence got too heavy and he had to walk it off alone. They also learned how to make each other laugh. It started small. A sarcastic comment here, a dry observation there. But it grew. One afternoon, Cade was trying to crack open a coconut with a rock, and the thing slipped out of his hands and nearly took out Alara's head. She ducked, just barely, and stared at him. "Did you just try to kill me?" "Accident." "Sure it was." "I'm serious. You're also a terrible shot." Cade grinned. "You want to try?" She took the rock, hefted it, and brought it down hard on the coconut. It split clean in half. She looked up at him, smug. "Like that. Show off." "Just competent." They split the coconut, drank the water, ate the flesh. And when Alara laughed at the way Cade tried to pick coconut shreds out of his teeth, he didn't even care that she was laughing at him. It felt good, normal, human. On the 20th day, the radio crackled to life. Cade was adjusting the antenna, something he did every morning, more out of habit than hope, when static suddenly broke through, sharp and loud. "Wait," Alara said, sitting up. "Did you hear that?" Cade froze. "Yeah." They both leaned closer. The static shifted, broke apart, and for half a second there was a voice. Faint, garbled, but unmistakably human. "Hello?" Cade said into the receiver. "Hello, can you hear me?" More static, then nothing. "Damn it." Cade adjusted the dial, tried again. "This is Cade Mercer. We're survivors of Flight 227. We're stranded on an island. Can anyone hear me?" Silence. Alara grabbed his arm. "Try again." He did, over and over. For 10 minutes, they cycled through every frequency, every channel, but the voice didn't come back. Finally, Cade set the radio down, frustration boiling in his chest. "It's dead. Or we're out of range. Or someone's looking for us," Alara said quietly. Cade looked at her. "You really think so?" "That was a voice, Mercer. A real voice. That means there's someone out there." "Maybe. Not maybe. Definitely." She stood, pacing now despite her ankle. "We need to be ready. We need a signal. Something they can see." "Like what?" "I don't know. Fire? Smoke? Something big." Cade thought for a moment. Then he nodded. "The flare gun. We've still got one flare left. We save that for when we see a plane or a ship. In the meantime, we build a fire, a big one, on the beach. That's going to take a lot of wood. Then we get a lot of wood." They spent the rest of the day gathering branches, driftwood, dried palm fronds, anything that would burn. They piled it high on the sand, close to the water, where it would be visible from the air. By sunset, the pile was taller than Cade. "That should do it," he said, wiping sweat from his forehead. Alara nodded. "We light it tomorrow, first thing." "And if no one sees it?" Then we build another one." Cade smiled faintly. "You don't give up, do you?" "Not usually." "Good, because I don't either." They lit the fire at dawn. It took a while to catch, damp wood, morning dew, but once it did, it roared. Black smoke billowed into the sky, thick and visible for miles. Cade and Alara stood on the beach, watching it burn, their eyes scanning the horizon. "Come on," Alara whispered. "Please." An hour passed, then 2. The fire burned lower, the smoke thinned, no planes, no ships, nothing. By midday, the fire was just embers. Alara sat down hard in the sand, her shoulders slumped. "I really thought—" "I know. I don't know how much longer I can do this." Cade sat beside her. "Yes, you do." "How do you know?" "Because you're still here, because you haven't quit yet." He nudged her shoulder gently, "And because I'm not letting you." She looked at him, eyes red-rimmed but dry. "You're annoyingly optimistic, you know that?" "Someone has to be." She laughed, quiet and broken. Then she leaned her head on his shoulder and closed her eyes. They sat like that for a long time, listening to the waves. That night they didn't talk much. They ate fish, drank water, sat by the fire. Cade could feel the weight of the day pressing down on both of them. The hope that had flared so bright that morning, now reduced to ash. "Tell me about Emma," Ilara said suddenly. Cade looked at her, surprised. "What do you want to know?" "Anything, everything. She hesitated. "I want to hear something good." Cade exhaled slowly, then he smiled. "She's obsessed with dinosaurs. Has been since she was 4. She knows all their names, all the periods, everything. Drives her teacher crazy because she corrects him constantly." Ilara smiled. "Sounds like a handful." "She is, but she's also—" His voice caught. He cleared his throat. "She's the best thing I've ever done. The only thing I got right." "I don't believe that." "It's true." "No, it's not. You pulled me out of a burning plane, Mercer. You kept us alive out here. She stopped. "You're a good man. Better than you think." Cade didn't know what to say to that, so he just said, "Thanks." They sat in silence for a while. Then Ilara said, "Do you think she's okay? Your daughter?" "Yeah, she's with my mom. She's safe. But do you think she's okay? Like, emotionally?" Cade frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean, she probably thinks you're dead. She's 6 years old, and she probably thinks her dad is gone." The words hit Cade like a fist. He'd thought about Emma constantly since the crash, but he'd always imagined her safe, cared for, waiting. He hadn't let himself think about what she was actually going through. His voice cracked. "I don't know." Ilara reached over and took his hand. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have—" "No, you're right." He squeezed her hand. "She's probably scared, confused, and I can't do anything about it. You're surviving. That's what you can do. And when we get off this island, you're going to see her again. You're going to hold her and tell her you're okay." "You really believe that?" "I have to, because if I don't, then what's the point of any of this?" Cade looked at her. At this woman who'd been a stranger 3 weeks ago, who'd become something he couldn't quite name, something important. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Okay." The next few days blurred together. They fell back into their routine, gathering food, maintaining the fire, checking the radio. But something had changed. The hope they'd felt after hearing that voice on the radio had dimmed, replaced by a kind of quiet resignation. They didn't talk about it, they just kept moving. One afternoon, Cade was checking the fish traps when Ilara called out to him from the beach. "Mercer, get over here!" He jogged over, his heart racing. "What is it?" She was standing at the edge of the water, pointing. "Look!" He followed her gaze. There, bobbing in the surf, was a piece of debris, a seat cushion from the plane, still partially intact. "So?" Cade said. "So that means the current brought it here, which means there could be more." "More debris?" "More supplies. More—" She stopped. "More survivors." Cade's stomach twisted. They hadn't talked about the other passengers since the first day. Hadn't let themselves think about the bodies they'd seen floating in the water. "Ilara, I know what you're going to say. But what if someone else made it? What if they're out there, waiting? Then they would have found us by now. Maybe, or maybe they're hurt, or stranded somewhere else on the island." She looked at him. "We have to check." Cade wanted to argue, wanted to tell her it was pointless, dangerous, a waste of energy they couldn't afford. But he saw the look in her eyes and knew she wouldn't let it go. "Fine," he said. "We'll search. But we do it smart. We don't split up, and we don't go far. Deal." They spent the rest of the day combing the beach, following the waterline, checking every piece of debris that washed ashore. They found luggage, shredded clothing, a laptop case with nothing inside. No people, no signs of life. By sunset, they were exhausted. "Nothing," Ilara said, staring out at the ocean. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. I knew it was a long shot." She turned to him. "But I had to try." "I know." They walked back to camp in silence. And that night, when they lay down side by side under the shelter, Ilara reached for his hand and held it. Cade didn't let go, Ian. On the 28th day, everything changed. Cade woke to the sound of Alara screaming. He bolted upright, heart pounding, and saw her stumbling out of the shelter, clutching her leg. "What happened?" he shouted, scrambling after her. "Snake!" she gasped. "It bit me!" Cade's blood turned to ice. He grabbed her arm, steadied her. "Where?" She pointed to her calf, 2 small puncture wounds already swelling. Shit. Cade's mind raced. "Sit down. Don't move." "Is it poisonous?" "I don't know." "You don't know?" "I didn't see it." He grabbed the first aid kit, yanked it open. There were bandages, antiseptic, painkillers, nothing for snake bites. Alara's breathing was getting faster. Panicked. "Cade, look at me." He grabbed her face, forced her to meet his eyes. "You're going to be okay. I'm going to take care of this." "How?" "I don't know yet, but I will." He cleaned the wound as best he could, wrapped it tight to slow the spread of venom, if there was venom. Then he made her lie down, elevated her leg, and watched. An hour passed. Then 2. Alara's legs swelled. The skin around the bite turned red, hot to the touch. She started shaking. "I'm cold," she said. "I know. Hold on." He built up the fire, wrapped her in the tarp, held her hand. She gripped it so tight his fingers went numb. "Mercer," she whispered. "Yeah? If I don't make it, you're going to make it. Just listen." Her voice was faint. "If I don't make it, I need you to know something. Alara, I'm glad it was you. I'm glad I wasn't alone out here." Cade's throat closed up. "You're not going to bite? Going to die. Promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll get off this island, that you'll see your daughter again. I'm not leaving without you. Mercer, I said I'm not leaving without you." He squeezed her hand. "So you better hold on, because I'm not doing this alone." Alara's eyes filled with tears. She nodded, just once, and closed her eyes. Cade stayed with her all night. He kept the fire going, kept her warm, kept talking to her even when she stopped responding. He told her about Emma, about his life before the crash, about the things he wanted to do when they got home. He didn't let himself think about what would happen if she didn't wake up. By morning, the fever broke. Alara's eyes fluttered open. She looked at him, confused, exhausted. "You're still here?" she whispered. "Yeah, I'm still here." She smiled faintly. "Told you I'd make it." Cade laughed, shaky and relieved. "Yeah, you did." He helped her sit up, gave her water, checked the wound. The swelling had gone down. The redness was fading. Whatever venom had been in her system, her body was fighting it off. "You're going to be okay," he said. "I know." She looked at him. "Because you wouldn't let me die." "Damn right." She reached up, touched his face. "Thank you." Cade didn't trust himself to speak, so he just leaned forward and kissed her. And this time, when they pulled apart, he didn't let go. Recovery took a week. Alara couldn't walk at first, could barely sit up without getting dizzy. Cade did everything, gathered food, maintained the fire, checked the radio. He didn't complain, didn't ask her to help. He just took care of her. And slowly, she got stronger. By the end of the week, she was walking again, slowly, carefully, but walking, and the first thing she did was help him rebuild the signal fire. "We're lighting this again," she said. "You sure?" "Yeah, I'm sure." They lit it at dawn the next day, and this time, when the smoke rose into the sky, Cade let himself hope. Because if they'd survived this long, they could survive anything. The smoke climbed into a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Cade stood beside Alara on the beach, both of them staring upward, waiting for something that might never come. "How long do we keep it going?" Alara asked. "Until it burns out. Then we build another one." She nodded, her arms crossed over her chest. She looked thinner than she had 5 weeks ago. They both did. The island had stripped them down to bone and sinew and stubbornness. "You think anyone's still looking?" she asked quietly. Cade didn't answer right away. He wanted to lie, to tell her yes, absolutely, of course they were. But he'd learned that Alara didn't want easy comfort. She wanted the truth, even when it hurt. "I don't know, he said, "but I think if we stop believing they are, we're done." She looked at him. So we keep going. Yeah, we keep going. The fire burned for 3 hours before the wind shifted and scattered the smoke. They let it die down naturally, conserving what wood they had left. Then they walked back to camp in silence, both of them lost in their own thoughts. That night, Alara sat by the fire and stared into the flames for a long time without speaking. Cade could see something working behind her eyes, some calculation or decision she was turning over and over. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "The company," she said. "Meridian." Cade raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because I keep wondering what's happening to it, who's running things while I'm gone, whether they think I'm dead." "They probably do." "Yeah." She poked at the fire with a stick. "And the worst part is I don't even care that much. I built that company from nothing, spent 15 years of my life making it what it is. And now I'm sitting on a beach eating fish I caught with a sharpened stick, and I don't miss it. Is that a bad thing? I don't know, maybe." She looked at him. "What does that say about me? That I can just let it go?" "It says you're human, that you've got priorities beyond a boardroom. Or maybe it says I was never as committed as I thought I was. Or maybe," Cade said carefully, "it says you're finally letting yourself want something different." Alara went quiet. Then she said, "What do you want, Mercer? When we get off this island, if we get off, what do you go back to?" Cade thought about that. "Emma. That's first, always. And after that? I don't know. My job, I guess. My apartment. The same life I had before. You want that?" He hesitated. The truth was, he hadn't thought much about his old life in weeks. It felt distant now, like something that had happened to someone else. "I want my daughter," he said finally. "The rest of it. I'll figure out when I get there." Alara nodded slowly. "Fair enough." They didn't talk about it again that night, but Cade could feel the question hanging in the air between them, unspoken but present. What happens to us when this is over? He didn't have an answer, and he wasn't sure Alara did either. On the 34th day, they found the wreckage. Not the plane. They'd already scavenged everything useful from that. This was different. A lifeboat, half buried in the sand on the far side of the island, partially hidden by overgrown vegetation. Cade spotted it first during one of his water runs. He'd been exploring a new section of coastline, looking for a faster route to the stream, when he saw the bright orange fabric poking out from under a tangle of vines. His heart kicked into overdrive. He ran back to camp, found Alara cleaning fish by the fire. "Come with me," he said, breathless. "Now." She looked up, startled. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, just come on." They made the trek together, Alara limping slightly but keeping pace. When they reached the lifeboat, she stopped dead. "Is that—" "Yeah." They approached it carefully, as if it might disappear if they moved too fast. Cade pulled away the vines, revealing the full shape of it. The boat was damaged. One side caved in, the inflation mechanism broken, but it was real. "Can we fix it?" Alara asked. Cade examined the hull, running his hands over the punctures and tears. "Maybe, if we can patch the holes and reinflate it somehow. That's a big if." "Yeah, but it's something." He looked at her. "It's more than we had this morning." Alara's face was unreadable. Then slowly, she smiled. "Okay, let's try." They spent the rest of the day hauling the lifeboat back to camp. It was heavier than it looked, awkward to carry, and by the time they got it to the beach near their shelter, both of them were drenched in sweat. But they had it. That night, Cade couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the boat, about the possibility of leaving. It felt too big, too fragile to hold on to. Like if he let himself believe it, the universe would snatch it away. Beside him, Alara shifted. "You awake?" "Yeah." Me too." They lay there in the dark, listening to the ocean. "Are you scared?" she asked. "Of what?" "Leaving, going back." Cade considered that. "A little. Are you?" "Yeah." She was quiet for a moment. "I keep thinking about what happens when we get rescued, when we're not this anymore." "This?" You and me, out here, surviving. She rolled onto her side to face him. What if that's all this is? What if it only works here, on the island, and the second we're back in the real world, it falls apart? Cade's chest tightened. He'd thought the same thing, late at night, when his mind wouldn't shut off. But hearing her say it out loud made it real. I don't know, he said honestly, but I know I don't want to lose you. You might not have a choice. I'm your boss, Mercer, or I was. That doesn't just go away. So we figure it out. How? I don't know, but we do. He reached for her hand in the dark, found it, held on. I'm not ready to give up on this. Are you? Alara's fingers tightened around his. No, I'm not. They didn't say anything else. They just lay there, holding on to each other, and tried to believe it was enough. Fixing the lifeboat became their new obsession. They worked on it every day using whatever materials they could scavenge. Cade fashioned patches from pieces of tarp, sealing the tiers with tree sap he'd found oozing from a trunk near their camp. Alara took apart the broken inflation mechanism, studying it with the same intensity she probably used to give to quarterly reports. This valve is shot, she said one afternoon, holding up a small rubber piece. We'd need to replace it. With what? I don't know, but without it we can't reinflate the chambers, and without air the boat won't float. Cade sat back on his heels, frustrated. So what do we do? Alara stared at the valve, turning it over in her hands. Then her eyes lit up. The radio, it's got a pressure release valve. Different size, but maybe we can modify it. You want to cannibalize the radio? It's not working anyway. When's the last time we picked up a signal? Cade couldn't argue with that. They hadn't heard anything on the radio in over a week. He'd kept trying, kept adjusting the antenna, but it was starting to feel pointless. All right, he said. Let's try it. They took apart the radio that night, carefully extracting the valve mechanism. Alara worked with steady hands, her focus absolute. Cade watched her, amazed at how easily she'd adapted. 5 weeks ago, she probably couldn't have told him what a valve was. Now she was rebuilding one with scrap parts and determination. Got it, she said, holding up the piece triumphantly. They installed it the next morning. The fit wasn't perfect, but with enough sap and pressure, they got it to seal. Then came the hard part, inflating the chambers. They took turns blowing air into the valve, their lungs burning, heads spinning. It took hours, but slowly, painfully, the lifeboat began to take shape. By sunset, it was done. They stood back, staring at their work. The boat wasn't pretty. The patches were uneven, the inflation lopsided. The whole thing looked like it might fall apart if you breathed on it wrong. But it was a boat. Think it'll float? Alara asked. Only one way to find out. They dragged it to the water's edge and pushed it in. For a terrifying moment, it just sat there, half submerged, listing to one side. Then it bobbed up. Held. Alara let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. It's floating. Yeah, it is. They waded in beside it, testing its stability, checking for leaks. The patches held. The air stayed in. It wasn't perfect, but it was seaworthy. We could actually do this, Alara said, her voice shaking. We could actually leave. Cade looked out at the open ocean, vast and endless. The thought of paddling out into that expanse with nothing but a patched-up lifeboat and hope was terrifying, but so was staying. We need to plan it out, he said. Supplies, route, timing. If we're going to do this, we do it smart. Alara nodded. Agreed. They pulled the boat back onto the beach and spent the rest of the evening strategizing. They'd need water, at least 2 days' worth, food, the flare gun, something to use as paddles. When do we go? Alara asked. Cade studied the sky. Weather's been calm the past few days. If it holds, we could try in the next 72 hours. And if it doesn't hold, then we wait. Alara looked at the boat, then at him. I'm ready, whenever you are. They spent the next 2 days preparing. Cade fashioned paddles from long branches, carving them down until they were smooth enough to use. Alara gathered coconuts, sealed them with sap to use as water containers. They packed dried fish, the last of the energy bars, the first aid kit, everything they'd need to survive. On the morning of the third day, Cade woke before dawn. The sky was clear, the ocean calm. It was now or never. He touched Alara's shoulder. Today. Her eyes opened immediately. You sure? As sure as I'm going to be. They didn't waste time. They loaded the boat, checked the patches one last time, and pushed it into the water. Cade climbed in first, then helped Alara in after him. The boat rocked under their weight but held steady. Which way? Alara asked. Cade pointed east toward the rising sun. That's where the current pulled us in. If we follow it back, we might hit a shipping lane. Might. Yeah, might. Alara picked up her paddle. Then let's go. They pushed off from the shore, paddling in tandem. The island grew smaller behind them, the jungle shrinking into a green smudge on the horizon. And then it was just ocean, everywhere, endless and blue and terrifying. We're really doing this, Alara said. Cade kept paddling. Yeah, we are. The first hour was almost peaceful. The water was calm, the sun warm on their backs. They fell into a rhythm, paddle, rest, paddle, rest. Cade's shoulders burned, but he pushed through it. Beside him, Alara did the same. By the second hour, the wind picked up. Small waves started to form, rocking the boat. Nothing dangerous yet, but enough to make Cade uneasy. You okay? He called over to Alara. Fine. You? Yeah. They kept going. The island was gone now, swallowed by the horizon. There was nothing but water in every direction. Cade tried not to think about how small they were, how easy it would be to capsize, to drift, to disappear without anyone ever knowing. By the third hour, the waves were bigger. The boat pitched and rolled, water sloshing over the sides. Alara grabbed the edge, her knuckles white. Cade, I know, just keep paddling. We're taking on waters, I know. He could see it now. The patches were leaking. Not badly, but enough. If they didn't bail soon, they'd sink. Stop paddling, Cade said. We need to bail. They used their hands, scooping water out as fast as they could. It was exhausting, endless. For every gallon they threw out, another half-gallon seeped back in. This isn't working, Alara said, breathing hard. It has to work. Cade! A wave hit them broadside, larger than the others. The boat tilted violently, and Alara screamed. Cade grabbed her arm, yanked her toward the center. Stay low! The boat righted itself, barely. Water poured over the sides. Their supplies shifted, one of the coconut containers rolling overboard and disappearing into the waves. We're going to capsize, Alara said. No, we're not. Yes, we are. Then we swim. We've done it before. Not in open ocean. Another wave hit, bigger this time. The boat flipped. Cade went under, the cold water swallowing him whole. He kicked hard, broke the surface, gasping. Alara! Here! She was 5 feet away, clinging to the overturned boat. Cade swam to her, grabbed the edge beside her. You okay? He shouted over the roar of the waves. No! Can you hold on? Do I have a choice? A wave crashed over them, dragging them under. Cade's lungs burned. His arms screamed. He kicked, fought, broke the surface again. Alara was still there, still holding on. We need to flip it back over, Cade yelled. How? On 3. Push down on your side. I'll pull up on mine. That's not going to work. It has to. 1, 2, 3. They pushed and pulled with everything they had. The boat shifted, tilted. For a second, Cade thought it was going to work. Then another wave hit, and the boat was ripped from their hands. It drifted away, fast, carried by the current. Cade watched it go, his heart sinking. They were alone. No boat, no supplies, just ocean. Alara looked at him, her face pale. What do we do now? Cade forced himself to think, to push past the panic clawing at his chest. We swim, he said. Back to the island. It's miles away. Then we swim for miles. Cade, we don't have another option, so we swim, together. And we don't stop until we hit sand. Alara stared at him. Then slowly, she nodded. Okay. They swam. It was the longest swim of Cade's life. Hours. It had to be hours. His arms went numb. His legs cramped. The salt water burned his eyes, his throat, his lungs. Beside him, Alara kept pace, her strokes uneven but determined. They didn't talk. There was no breath for talking. They just swam. The sun climbed higher, then started to fall. The water darkened. Cade's vision blurred. He thought about Emma, about never seeing her again, about dying out here, his body lost to the ocean, her never knowing what happened to him. He thought about Alara, about everything they'd survived, everything they'd built. He wasn't going to let it end like this. "Keep going," he gasped. "Don't stop." Alara didn't answer, but she kept swimming, and then, finally, impossibly, Cade's feet touched sand. He staggered forward, dragging Alara with him. They collapsed on the beach together, gasping, shaking, alive. For a long time, neither of them moved. They just lay there, staring up at the sky, their bodies broken and exhausted. "We made it," Alara whispered. "Yeah, we actually made it." Cade turned his head to look at her. Her face was streaked with salt and tears, her hair plastered to her head. She looked like she'd been through hell. She'd never looked more beautiful. "I'm sorry," he said. "For what?" "For almost getting you killed." Alara laughed, raw and broken. "You saved my life. Again." "We saved each other." She reached for his hand, laced her fingers through his. "Yeah, we did." They lay there until the sun set, until the stars came out. And when they finally dragged themselves back to camp, back to the shelter they'd built, Cade realized something. The island wasn't a prison anymore. It was home. That night, they didn't talk about leaving. They sat by the fire, close enough that their shoulders touched, and ate the fish Alara had caught that morning. The failure of the boat sat between them like a stone, heavy and undeniable. "I really thought it would work," Alara said quietly. "So did I." "What do we do now?" Cade stared into the flames. "We survive, same as we've been doing." "For how long?" "As long as it takes." Alara was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "What if no one comes? What if we're here for years or forever?" Cade didn't have an answer for that. The thought had crossed his mind more than once, usually late at night when sleep wouldn't come, but he'd never let himself dwell on it. "Then we make a life here," he said finally. "A life. Yeah, we've already got shelter, food, water. We've got each other." He looked at her. "It's not what either of us planned, but it's not nothing." Alara's eyes were wet. "You'd really be okay with that? Never seeing your daughter again, never going home?" The question hit him like a punch. "No, I wouldn't be okay with it, but I'd survive it, because I'd have you." She let out a shaky breath. "You can't mean that." "Why not?" "Because you barely know me. Because we've been stuck together for 5 weeks in an impossible situation. Because this," she gestured between them, "isn't real. It's survival instinct, proximity, desperation." "You think that's all this is? I don't know what this is." Cade set down his fish and turned to face her fully. "I know exactly what this is. It's messy and complicated and probably insane, but it's real, and I'm not going to apologize for it." Alara stared at him, her jaw tight. "What do you want from me, Mercer?" "I want you to stop pretending this doesn't matter, that we don't matter. It's not that simple." "Yes, it is." "No, it's not," her voice cracked. "Because when we get rescued, if we get rescued, everything changes. You go back to being the logistics guy, and I go back to being the CEO, and we both pretend none of this happened. Is that what you want?" "I don't know what I want." They glared at each other, the fire crackling between them. Then Alara's face crumpled. "I'm scared," she whispered. Cade moved closer, pulled her into his arms. She didn't resist. She just collapsed against him, her body shaking with silent sobs. "I know," he said softly. "I'm scared too." "Of what?" "Of losing you. of going back to a world where you're out of reach, of forgetting what this felt like. Alara pulled back just enough to look at him. Her eyes were red, raw. I don't want to forget. Then don't. It's not that easy. Why not? Because people like me don't end up with people like you. That's not how the world works. Cade's chest tightened. People like me. I didn't mean it like that. Then how did you mean it? She opened her mouth, closed it, looked away. Cade stood up, anger flaring hot in his chest. You know what? Maybe you're right. Maybe this is just proximity. Maybe the second we're off this island, you'll go back to your penthouse and your boardrooms, and I'll go back to my apartment and my kid, and we'll both move on like none of this ever happened. Cade, but don't tell me it's not real. Don't tell me you don't feel this. He pointed at the space between them. Because I know you do. I see it every time you look at me. Alara stood too, her hands clenched into fists. You want to know what I feel? I feel terrified. Because everything I thought I wanted, the power, the control, the success, none of it matters anymore. And the only thing that does matter is standing right in front of me, and I don't know how to hold on to it. So don't let go. What if I don't have a choice? There's always a choice. They stood there staring at each other, the space between them charged and electric. Then Alara closed the distance and kissed him, hard and desperate. Cade kissed her back, pulling her close, pouring everything he couldn't say into the press of his mouth against hers. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. I don't want to lose you, Alara said. You won't. How do you know? Because I won't let you. She almost smiled. You're so sure of yourself. No, I'm sure of us. Alara rested her forehead against his. Okay. Okay? Yeah, okay. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the firelight, and let the rest of the world fall away. The next morning brought rain. Not a storm this time, just steady rainfall that turned the beach gray and made everything slick. Cade woke to the sound of it drumming against the shelter, Alara still asleep beside him, her face peaceful in a way it never was when she was awake. He watched her for a moment, this woman who'd somehow become the center of his world. Then he carefully extracted himself from under the tarp and stepped outside. The island looked different in the rain, softer, almost gentle. He walked down to the water's edge, let the rain soak through his clothes, and stared out at the endless gray horizon. They'd been here 41 days now, 6 weeks, a month and a half of his life spent on this strip of sand and jungle, fighting to survive. And the strangest part was how normal it had started to feel. He thought about Emma less often now. Not because he loved her less, but because thinking about her hurt too much. The guilt of it sat in his chest like a stone, that he could go hours, sometimes a whole day, without her face crossing his mind. What kind of father did that make him? You're up early. Cade turned. Alara stood at the edge of the shelter, wrapped in the tarp like a blanket, her hair wild around her face. Couldn't sleep, he said. She walked over to him, stood close enough that their shoulders touched. What are you thinking about? Emma, home, the fact that we almost died yesterday trying to leave. Cheerful thoughts. Yeah. Alara was quiet for a moment, then she said, Do you regret it, trying to leave? No, we had to try. Even though it almost killed us? Especially because of that. He looked at her. At least now we know. The boat won't work, so we stop wasting time on it and focus on what will. And what's that? Staying alive long enough to be found. Alara's jaw tightened. What if we're not found? Then we deal with that when it happens. But until then, we don't give up. She studied his face, searching for something. Then she nodded. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. She leaned her head on his shoulder. As long as we're together, I can do this. Cade wrapped an arm around her, pulled her close. Good, because I'm not going anywhere. They stood like that in the rain, holding each other, and for a little while, the rest of the world didn't exist. The days that followed settled into a new rhythm. They stopped talking about rescue, stopped checking the horizon every hour. Instead, they focused on making the island livable. Cade built a proper smokehouse for drying fish. Alara mapped out the entire coastline, marking freshwater sources and good fishing spots on a piece of bark with charcoal. They worked together, moved together, existed together in a way that felt almost domestic. And slowly, the sharp edges of survival started to smooth out into something that looked almost like a life. One afternoon, Cade was repairing the shelter, reinforcing the supports with fresh vines, when Alara called out to him from the beach. "Mercer, come here!" He jogged over, his heart already picking up speed. But when he reached her, she wasn't panicking, she was smiling. "Look," she pointed at the sand. There, in the wet sand near the water, were tiny tracks, dozens of them, leading from the jungle down to the ocean. "Turtle tracks," Alara said. "They nested here." Cade crouched down, studying the marks. "You sure?" "Yeah. I used to see them when I was a kid. My dad and I would watch them hatch." Her voice went soft. "It's been years since I thought about that." Cade looked up at her. "Good memory?" "The best." She smiled, but it was edged with sadness. "He died when I was 16. Heart attack. I didn't get to say goodbye." "I'm sorry." "Yeah, me too." She knelt beside him, tracing one of the tracks with her finger. "He would have liked you, I think." "Yeah?" "Yeah. He didn't care about money or status or any of that. He just cared about whether you were decent, whether you showed up when it mattered." Cade's chest tightened. "Sounds like a good man." "He was. I spent so many years trying to prove I didn't need anyone, that I could do everything on my own. I think I forgot what he actually taught me, which was that it's okay to need people, that strength isn't about doing everything alone." She looked at him. "I'm starting to remember that now." Cade didn't know what to say to that, so he just reached over and took her hand, and they sat there together, watching the tide erase the turtle tracks one by one. That night, Alara asked him about the Marines. They were lying under the shelter, the fire crackling nearby, the sky clear and full of stars. Cade had been drifting off to sleep when her voice pulled him back. "You never told me why you left," she said. "The Marines." Cade opened his eyes. "Does it matter?" "It matters to me." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I got hurt. Not physically, just tired. Of following orders I didn't believe in. Of watching people die for reasons that stopped making sense. So you walked away." "Yeah, got my discharge, came home, figured out how to be a civilian again." He paused. "That's when I met Emma's mom." Alara shifted beside him. "You don't talk about her much." "Not much to say. We were together for 2 years. She got pregnant, we tried to make it work, but she—" He stopped. "She wasn't ready to be a mom. So she left." "She just left?" "Signed over custody, packed her stuff, moved to the other side of the country. I haven't heard from her in 4 years." Alara was silent for a moment. Then she said, "That must have been hard. Raising Emma alone." "It was. Still is." He turned his head to look at her. "But it's the best thing I've ever done. She's the best thing I've ever done. She's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her." Alara's hand found his in the dark. "You're going to see her again, you know. I really believe that." Cade wanted to believe it too, but belief was getting harder to hold on to. "What about you?" he asked, changing the subject. "You said you were married once." "Briefly. It didn't last." "Why not?" "Because I was married to my work more than I was to him. He figured that out pretty quick." She laughed, but it sounded hollow. "He told me I'd end up alone if I kept choosing the company over everything else." Guess he was right. "You're not alone now." "No, I'm not." She squeezed his hand. "But what happens when we get back, when I'm the CEO again and you're—" "Don't," Cade said quietly. "We talked about this." "I know, but it keeps circling back, because I don't know how to make this work out there. I don't know how to be this person, the one who sits on a beach and watches turtles and doesn't care about quarterly earnings when I'm back in that world. Then don't go back to being that person. It's not that simple." "Why not?" "Because that person is who I've been for 20 years. I don't know how to be anyone else. Cade propped himself up on one elbow, looked down at her. Yeah, you do. You've been her for the past 6 weeks. You just don't believe it yet. Alara's eyes glistened in the firelight. What if I can't? What if we get rescued and I turn back into that person and lose you because of it? Then we fight for it. We figure it out, but we don't give up before we even try. She stared at him for a long moment. Then she pulled him down and kissed him, slow and desperate, like she was trying to memorize the shape of him. When they broke apart, she whispered, I don't want to lose you. You won't. Promise me. I can't promise something I don't control, but I can promise I'll fight like hell to keep you. Alara's breath hitched. That's enough. On the 49th day, the helicopter came. Cade heard it first, a distant thump, thump, thump that didn't belong to the jungle. He was gathering firewood when the sound cut through the air, faint but unmistakable. His heart stopped. Alara! She came running from the beach, her face alarmed. What? Listen. They both froze. The sound grew louder, closer. And then Cade saw it, a dark shape against the sky, moving toward the island. Oh my God, Alara breathed. Is that... Go! Get the flare gun! Alara sprinted back to camp. Cade ran to the beach, waving his arms, shouting even though he knew they couldn't hear him yet. The helicopter was still too far away, sweeping low over the water. Alara returned, breathless, the flare gun clutched in her hand. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped it. Here! Cade took it from her, aimed it at the sky, and fired. The flare shot up in a bright red arc, screaming through the air. For a moment, nothing happened. The helicopter kept moving, kept searching. Then it banked, hard, turned toward them. They saw us, Alara said, her voice breaking. They saw us. The helicopter descended, kicking up sand and wind as it hovered over the beach. A door slid open, and 2 figures in rescue gear appeared, lowering a basket on a cable. Cade grabbed Alara's arm, pulled her close. This is it. She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. I'm not ready. I know, but we have to go. The basket hit the sand. One of the rescuers climbed down, jogging over to them. Are you the survivors from Flight 227? The man shouted over the roar of the blades. Yes, Cade shouted back. We're the only ones. We need to get you out of here. Can you walk? Yeah, we're good. The rescuer gestured to the basket. One at a time. Who's going first? Cade looked at Alara. She was staring at the helicopter, her face pale. You go, he said. What? No. I'll be right behind you. I promise. She grabbed his shirt, her grip desperate. Don't you dare leave me. I won't, I swear. Now go. The rescuer helped Alara into the basket, secured the straps around her. She kept her eyes on Cade the entire time, like she was afraid he'd disappear. Then they lifted her up, slowly, steadily, until she disappeared into the helicopter. Cade's chest felt like it was caving in. The basket came back down. The rescuer gestured for him to get in. Cade climbed aboard, his hands numb, his mind blank. As they lifted him up, he looked down at the island, at the shelter they'd built, at the beach where they'd fought to survive. And then it was gone. But the inside of the helicopter was chaos. Alara was wrapped in a thermal blanket, a medic checking her vitals. She reached for Cade the second he was pulled inside, and he grabbed her hand, held on tight. We're okay, he said, even though his voice was drowned out by the noise. We're okay. The medic started asking questions, names, injuries, how long they'd been stranded. Cade answered mechanically, his brain struggling to process that this was real, that they were actually leaving. How many survivors? The medic asked. Just us, Cade said. The medic's face fell. You're sure? We searched the wreckage. We didn't find anyone else alive. The medic nodded grimly, made a note on his clipboard. Then he turned to Alara. Ma'am, we're going to need to get you to a hospital. You're dehydrated, malnourished, and you've got some infected wounds we need to treat. I'm fine, Alara said. Ma'am, I said I'm fine. The medic glanced at Cade, who just shook his head. There was no arguing with her when she got like this. The helicopter banked, heading away from the island. Through the window, Cade watched it shrink into the distance until it was nothing but a green dot on the horizon. And then it was gone. Alara's hand tightened around his. We did it. Yeah, we did. But neither of them sounded happy about it. They were taken to a hospital on the mainland. The staff descended on them the moment they landed. Doctors, nurses, administrators, all asking questions, running tests, taking blood samples. Cade was separated from Alara almost immediately, ushered into a private room where they hooked him up to an IV and started pumping fluids into his system. Where's Alara? He asked the nurse. Ms. Voss is being treated in another wing. She's stable, don't worry. I want to see her. You will, as soon as the doctors clear you both. Cade tried to argue, but exhaustion hit him like a truck. His body, finally allowed to stop fighting, just shut down. He fell asleep before he could protest. When he woke, it was dark outside. A doctor was standing at the foot of his bed, reviewing a chart. Welcome back, Mr. Mercer, the doctor said. How are you feeling? Tired? Confused? Where's Alara? Ms. Voss is resting. She's in good hands. I need to see her. You will. But first, we need to talk about your daughter. Cade's heart stopped. What about her? She's here. She's been waiting for you. The words didn't make sense. She's what? Your mother brought her as soon as she heard you'd been found. She's in the waiting room. Cade's throat closed up. She's here? Would you like me to bring her in? He couldn't speak. He just nodded. The doctor left. And a moment later, the door opened and Emma ran in. She looked so small, so much smaller than he remembered. Her hair was in pigtails, her face streaked with tears, and when she saw him, she let out a sound that broke his heart. Daddy! She launched herself at him, and Cade caught her, pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. I'm here, baby, he choked out. I'm here. Emma sobbed against his chest, her little hands fisting in his hospital gown. I thought you were dead. Everyone said you were dead. I'm not dead. I'm right here. I'm okay. Promise? I promise. She pulled back just enough to look at him, her eyes wide and wet. You're really okay? Yeah, sweetheart. I'm really okay. Emma hugged him again, harder this time, and Cade held her like he'd never let go. Over her shoulder, he saw his mom standing in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. She mouthed, "Thank you," and Cade nodded, his own eyes burning. He was home. But as he held his daughter, all he could think about was Alara, alone in another room, facing her own reunion, her own reality. And he wondered if they'd ever find their way back to each other. They kept him in the hospital for 3 days. During that time, Cade was poked, prodded, tested, and interviewed by what felt like 100 different people. Doctors wanted to know about his physical health. Psychologists wanted to know about his mental state. Reporters wanted to know about the crash, the island, the survival. He answered their questions as best he could, but his mind was somewhere else. On Alara, on what she was going through, on whether she was okay. He tried to see her, multiple times. But every time he asked, he was told she was in meetings, with lawyers, with her company, with the media. On the 3rd day, they finally let him go. Emma had been staying with his mom in a hotel nearby, and she practically tackled him when he walked through the door. Cade held her, breathed her in, and tried to feel grateful. He was alive. He was home. He had his daughter. But something was missing. That night, after Emma fell asleep curled against his side, Cade's mom sat down across from him. You want to talk about it? She asked. Talk about what? Whoever you're thinking about. Because it's not me, and it's not Emma. Cade looked at her, surprised. How? You're my son. I know when something's eating at you. She leaned forward. So who is she? Cade hesitated. Then he said, Alara Voss. His mom's eyebrows shot up. The CEO? Your boss? Yeah. And you too? Yeah. His mom sat back processing that. Okay. Does she feel the same way? I think so, but I don't know if it matters. Why not? Because she's back in her world now, and I'm back in mine. And those worlds don't exactly overlap. His mom studied him for a long moment. Then she said, "You love her." It wasn't a question, but Kate answered anyway. "Yeah, I do." "Then fight for her." "It's not that simple." "It never is. But that doesn't mean you give up." She reached over, squeezed his hand. "You spent 6 weeks fighting to survive. Don't stop fighting now." Cade wanted to believe her, wanted to think it was that easy, but he knew better. Odds. The news broke the next morning. Cade was making breakfast, or trying to, his hands still not quite steady, when his phone started blowing up. Texts, calls, notifications. He ignored them until his mom turned on the TV, and there she was. Alara. Standing at a podium, dressed in a sharp black suit, her hair pulled back, her face composed. She looked every inch the CEO she'd been before the crash, but Cade could see the cracks, the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands gripped the podium just a little too tight. "Ms. Voss, can you tell us about your time on the island?" a reporter asked. "It was challenging," Alara said, her voice calm. "But I had help. Cade Mercer, one of our logistics specialists, kept us both alive. Without him, I wouldn't be standing here today." "What's your relationship with Mr. Mercer?" Alara's expression didn't change. "He's a colleague, a friend, someone I owe my life to." Cade's chest tightened. A colleague. A friend. That's all he was to her now. He turned off the TV before he could hear any more. 3 days later, Cade went back to work. He didn't want to. Didn't need to, really. The company had offered him extended leave, counseling, whatever he needed. But sitting around his apartment was driving him crazy, so he went in. The office was exactly the same. Same gray cubicles, same fluorescent lights, same hum of activity. Like the past 6 weeks hadn't happened at all. People stared at him when he walked in, whispered. A few came up to shake his hand, to tell him they were glad he was okay. But most just stared. He made it to his desk, sat down, and stared at his computer screen. This was his life now. This was what he'd come back to. And it felt completely hollow. Mercer. He looked up. His supervisor, a middle-aged man named Greg, stood at the edge of his cubicle. "Hey, Greg. Good to see you back. You doing all right?" "Yeah, I'm good." Greg nodded, clearly uncomfortable. "Listen, I know you've been through a lot. If you need anything, I'm fine." "Right. Well, just so you know, Ms. Voss is back in the building. She's been in meetings all week, but I'm sure she'll want to see you." Cade's heart kicked. "She's here?" "Yeah, top floor, same as always." Greg hesitated. "You two were the only survivors, right?" "Must have been. Intense." "Yeah, it was." Greg nodded again, then walked away. Cade sat there, staring at his computer, his mind racing. She was here, in the same building, just a few floors away. Before he could talk himself out of it, he stood up and headed for the elevator. The executive floor was different, quieter, more polished, the kind of place where Cade never belonged and everyone knew it. He walked past assistants and executives, ignoring their stares, until he reached Alara's office. The door was closed. Through the glass, he could see her sitting at her desk, talking on the phone. She looked up, saw him. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she said something into the phone, hung up, and stood. She opened the door. "Mercer." "Alara." They stared at each other, and Cade realized he had no idea what to say. "Come in," she said finally. He stepped inside. She closed the door behind him. The office was enormous, floor-to-ceiling windows, sleek furniture, a view of the city that probably cost more than his entire apartment. It was everything the island wasn't. "How are you?" Alara asked. "Fine. You?" "Busy, playing catch-up." "Yeah, I bet." Silence stretched between them. Awkward, painful. "I saw your press conference," Cade said. Alara's jaw tightened. "I had to say something. The media wouldn't let it go. You called me a colleague. You are." "That's all I am?" She looked away. "Cade?" because it felt like more than that. On the island. It was different on the island. Was it? Yes. She turned back to him, her face hard. Out there, we were equals. We had to be. But we're not on the island anymore. So that's it? We just pretend none of it happened? I'm not pretending. I'm being realistic. This, she gestured between them, doesn't work here. Why not? Because I'm the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company and you're a logistics specialist. I know. You made that pretty clear. Alara flinched. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? She opened her mouth, closed it, looked away. Cade felt something crack inside him. You know what? Forget it. You were right. It was just the island, just survival. Cade, I'll see you around, Ms. Voss. He turned and walked out before she could say anything else, and he didn't look back. Cade made it to the elevator before his hands started shaking. He jabbed the button, waited for the doors to open, and stepped inside. As they slid shut, he caught a glimpse of his reflection in the polished steel, hollow-eyed, jaw tight, looking like a man who'd just lost something he couldn't name. The elevator descended, and with each floor, the weight in his chest grew heavier. He'd been stupid to think it could work, stupid to believe that what they'd had on the island could survive in the real world. Alara had made her choice, and it wasn't him. When the doors opened on the ground floor, Cade walked out and didn't look back. The next 2 weeks were a blur. Cade went through the motions. Work, home, dinner with Emma, bedtime stories, repeat. He smiled when he was supposed to smile, laughed when Emma told her terrible knock-knock jokes, pretended everything was fine. But it wasn't fine. Emma noticed first. Daddy, are you sad? She asked one night, curled up against him on the couch. Cade looked down at her, surprised. What? No, baby, I'm okay. You don't seem okay. I'm just tired. From the island? Yeah, from the island. Emma was quiet for a moment, then she said, Was it scary? Sometimes. Were you alone? Cade hesitated. No, there was someone with me. Who? A woman. Her name is Alara. Emma's eyes went wide. Is she your girlfriend? No, she's... Cade stopped. She's just someone I knew. Do you miss her? The question hit him like a punch. Yeah, sweetheart, I do. Emma studied his face with the serious expression she got when she was thinking hard. Then she said, You should tell her. It's not that simple. Why not? Because grown-up stuff is complicated. Emma wrinkled her nose. That's dumb. Cade couldn't help it. He laughed. Yeah, it kind of is. She snuggled closer to him. I think you should tell her anyway, because when I miss someone, I tell them, and then I feel better. Cade kissed the top of her head. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just don't notice. Fair point. But as Emma drifted off to sleep, her words echoed in Cade's head. You should tell her. Maybe his 6-year-old daughter was smarter than he'd given her credit for. Alara's life had become a cage. She sat in her office on the 42nd floor, staring at spreadsheets that used to excite her, and felt nothing. The board wanted updates. Investors wanted reassurance. The media wanted sound bites. Everyone wanted something from her, and she gave it to them with the same polished efficiency she always had. But inside she was hollow. She'd thrown herself back into work the way she always did when things got hard. 12-hour days, back-to-back meetings, strategy sessions that stretched into the night. It was what she knew, what she was good at. It was also killing her. Ms. Voss? Alara looked up. Her assistant, a sharp young woman named Monica, stood in the doorway holding a tablet. The quarterly report is ready for your review, and you have a call with the Singapore office in 10 minutes. Right, thanks. Monica hesitated. Are you all right, ma'am? I'm fine. It's just, you've been working 16-hour days since you got back. Maybe you should take some time. I said I'm fine, Monica. Monica's face closed off. Of course. I'll let you know when Singapore is on the line. She left, and Alara was alone again. She leaned back in her chair, closed her eyes, and for the first time in 2 weeks, let herself think about Cade. The way he'd looked at her in this office. The hurt in his eyes when she'd called him a colleague. The way he'd walked out without looking back. She'd told herself it was the right thing to do. The smart thing. That keeping him at arm's length was protecting them both from something that could never work. But every night, when she went back to her empty penthouse and lay in her enormous bed, all she could think about was the shelter they'd built together. The sound of rain on palm fronds. The way his hand had felt in hers. She missed him, and she didn't know how to fix it. The scandal broke on a Wednesday. Alara was in a board meeting when Monica burst in, her face pale. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but you need to see this." She handed Alara her phone. On the screen was a news article, the headline screaming in bold letters, "Meridian Global CFO under investigation for fraud." Alara's blood turned to ice. "What is this?" "It broke 20 minutes ago. Marcus Holt has been embezzling funds for the past 3 years. The SEC is launching a full investigation." The room erupted. Board members shouting questions, demanding answers. But Alara barely heard them. She was already scrolling through the article, her mind racing. Marcus Holt, her CFO, the man she'd trusted to manage the company's finances while she'd been stranded on an island. He'd stolen from her, from the company, and she'd been too distracted to see it coming. "We need to make a statement," one of the board members said. "We need to distance ourselves from Holt immediately." Another added, "We need to figure out how deep this goes." Alara stood, silencing them all. "I'll handle it." "Ms. Voss, I said I'll handle it." She walked out of the boardroom, Monica trailing behind her. "What do you need me to do?" Monica asked. "Get me every file Marcus had access to in the past 6 months, and get me legal on the line, now." "Yes, ma'am." Alara went back to her office and sat down at her desk. Her hands were shaking, but her mind was clear. Marcus had made a mistake. He'd underestimated her. Thought that because she'd been gone, because she'd been vulnerable, she wouldn't fight back. He was wrong. It took 3 days to unravel the full extent of the fraud. Marcus had siphoned off millions, hiding it in offshore accounts and shell companies. He'd covered his tracks well, but not well enough. Alara worked around the clock with her legal team, building the case, gathering evidence, preparing for war. On the 4th day, she called a press conference. The room was packed. Reporters, cameras, microphones everywhere. Alara stood at the podium, dressed in a navy suit, her hair pulled back, her face composed. But inside she was on fire. "Thank you all for coming," she said. "I'm here to address the recent allegations against Marcus Holt, former CFO of Meridian Global. After a thorough internal investigation, we have determined that Mr. Holt engaged in systematic fraud, embezzling over $30 million from the company over a 3-year period." The room exploded with questions. Alara raised a hand, silencing them. "We have cooperated fully with the SEC and have turned over all evidence to the appropriate authorities. Mr. Holt has been terminated, and we are pursuing all legal avenues to recover the stolen funds. Meridian Global will not tolerate corruption at any level, and we are committed to full transparency moving forward." "Ms. Voss, how did this happen under your watch?" a reporter shouted. Alara met his eyes. "It happened because I was distracted, because I trusted the wrong person. But I take full responsibility, and I am committed to making sure it never happens again." "What about the crash? Were you in any way compromised during your time on the island?" Alara's jaw tightened. "The crash was a tragedy. 43 people lost their lives, but it didn't compromise my ability to lead this company. If anything, it reminded me what real survival looks like. And I can promise you, Meridian Global will survive this." She paused, then added, "I also want to acknowledge someone who played a critical role in my survival. Cade Mercer, one of our logistics specialists, kept me alive on that island. He showed me what true integrity looks like, what it means to do the right thing even when it's hard, even when no one's watching." The room went silent. "Mr. Mercer exemplifies the kind of character this company was built on, and I owe him more than I can ever repay." She didn't take any more questions. She just walked off the podium and left. Cade was at his desk when his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, saw it was his mom, and answered. "Hey, Mom. Are you watching the news? No? Why? Turn it on, now." Cade frowned, pulled up a news stream on his computer, and there she was. Ilara, at a podium, talking about him. He watched the entire clip, his heart pounding. When it ended, he just sat there, stunned. Cade? His mom's voice came through the phone. You still there? Yeah, I'm here. That woman just defended you in front of the entire world. I know. So what are you going to do about it? Cade didn't have an answer. That night, Cade couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying Ilara's words over and over. She'd called him out by name, told the world what he'd done, acknowledged him in a way she never had when they were face to face. But what did it mean? Was it just PR? A calculated move to deflect from the scandal? Or was it something else? He didn't know. And not knowing was driving him crazy. Finally, at 2 a.m, he gave up on sleep. He got out of bed, checked on Emma, still fast asleep, her dinosaur stuffed animal clutched to her chest, and grabbed his jacket. He didn't have a plan. Didn't know what he was going to say. He just knew he had to see her. Ilara's penthouse was on the 60th floor of a gleaming high-rise downtown. Cade stood outside the building, staring up at it, feeling completely out of place. This wasn't his world. It never had been. But he went in anyway. The doorman stopped him immediately. Can I help you? I'm here to see Ilara Voss. The doorman looked him up and down, clearly skeptical. Is she expecting you? No? Then I can't let you up. Cade pulled out his phone, found Ilara's number, the one she'd given him weeks ago for emergencies, and called it. It rang, once, twice. Then she answered. Hello, it's me. Silence on the other end. Then, quietly, Cade? Yeah, I'm downstairs. Can I come up? Another pause. Give me 2 minutes. She hung up. Cade waited, his heart hammering in his chest. The doorman watched him suspiciously, but didn't say anything. After what felt like an eternity, the phone at the desk rang. The doorman answered, listened, then looked at Cade with surprise. You're cleared. 60th floor, penthouse suite. Cade nodded and headed for the elevator. When the doors opened on the 60th floor, Ilara was standing there. She looked different than she had at the press conference. Smaller, more vulnerable. Her hair was down, her face bare of makeup, and she was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, clothes Cade had never seen her in. She looked more like the woman from the island than the CEO from the boardroom. Hi, she said. Hi. They stood there, awkward and uncertain. You want to come in? Ilara asked. Yeah. She led him inside. The penthouse was massive, floor-to-ceiling windows, designer furniture, art on the walls that probably cost more than Cade's car, but it felt cold, empty. Nice place, Cade said. It's just a place. They stood in the living room, neither of them sitting down. I saw your press conference, Cade said finally. I figured you might. Why did you do that? Say all that about me? Ilara crossed her arms. Because it was true. That's not what I asked. She looked away. Because I needed people to know that you weren't just some guy who happened to be there, that you saved my life. I didn't save you, we saved each other. I know, but I needed to say it anyway. Cade took a step closer. Why, Ilara? Because I was wrong about everything, about us. His breath caught. What are you saying? I'm saying I was scared of what it would mean if I admitted how I felt, of what people would think, of losing everything I'd worked for. And now? Now I realize I already lost the only thing that mattered. She looked at him, her eyes wet. I lost you. Cade's chest tightened. You didn't lose me. You pushed me away. I know, and I'm sorry. I was trying to protect myself, but all I did was hurt you. Yeah, you did. I don't expect you to forgive me. I needed you to know that I meant what I said. Out there on the island. All of it. Cade stared at her. At this woman who'd been so strong, so untouchable, now standing in front of him with her walls completely down. What do you want, Ilara? He asked quietly. I want you. I want us. I don't care what anyone thinks. I don't care about the optics or the hierarchy or any of it. She took a shaky breath. I just want you. You sure about that? Because I come with a 6-year-old who has very strong opinions about dinosaurs and bedtime. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment. I can't afford fancy dinners or trips to Paris or any of the stuff you're probably used to. I don't want any of that. Then what do you want? I want what we had on the island. I want to build something real. With you. Cade closed the distance between them. You mean that? Yeah, I do. He searched her face, looking for any trace of doubt, but all he saw was certainty. Okay, he said. Okay? Yeah, okay. Alara let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and threw her arms around him. Cade held her tight, burying his face in her hair, and for the first time in weeks, he felt like he could breathe. I'm sorry, she whispered. For everything. I know. Me too. They stood there for a long time, just holding each other, and when they finally pulled apart, Alara was smiling. So what now? She asked. Cade grinned. Now you meet Emma. Alara's eyes went wide. Now? Tonight? She's asleep, but tomorrow, if you're ready. I don't know if I'm ready. No one's ever ready, but you'll be great. Alara bit her lip. What if she doesn't like me? She will. Trust me. How do you know? Because you're impossible not to like once people get past the terrifying CEO thing. Alara laughed. Terrifying? A little. She shook her head, but she was still smiling. Okay. Tomorrow. I'll meet her. Good. They stood there grinning at each other like idiots. And then Cade leaned in and kissed her. It was different than the kisses on the island. Less desperate, less urgent, but deeper, more certain. When they broke apart, Alara rested her forehead against his. I love you, you know. Cade's heart skipped. Yeah? Yeah. Good. Because I love you too. The next day, Cade brought Emma to the park. Alara met them there, dressed down in jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked nervous, which Cade found oddly endearing. Emma spotted her first. Is that her? Yeah, that's her. Emma studied Alara with the critical eye of a 6-year-old. She's pretty. She is. Does she like dinosaurs? I don't know. You'll have to ask her. Emma marched over to Alara, chin held high. Cade followed, trying not to laugh. Hi, Emma said. I'm Emma. Alara crouched down to her level. Hi, Emma. I'm Alara. My dad says you were on an island together. We were. Was it scary? Sometimes, but your dad made it better. Emma nodded seriously. He's good at that. He makes me feel better when I'm scared too. Alara smiled. He's pretty good at it. Do you like dinosaurs? Alara blinked. I don't know much about them. Emma's face lit up. I can teach you. Did you know the T-Rex wasn't actually the biggest dinosaur? That was the Argentinosaurus. I didn't know that. Come on, I'll tell you all about them. Emma grabbed Alara's hand and started pulling her toward the playground. Alara looked back at Cade, wide-eyed. He just grinned and mouthed, You got this. They spent the afternoon at the park. Emma talked non-stop about dinosaurs, and Alara listened like it was the most important thing in the world. Cade watched them together, his daughter and the woman he loved, and felt something settle in his chest. This could work. They could make this work. Later, after Emma wore herself out on the swings and fell asleep in the car, Alara walked Cade to his apartment. She's amazing, Alara said. She is. Thank you for letting me meet her. Thank you for showing up. They stood outside his building, the city buzzing around them. So what happens now? Alara asked. With us? Cade thought about it. I don't know. We figure it out, one day at a time. That's not much of a plan. It's the only plan I've got. Alara laughed. All right, I can work with that. Yeah? Yeah. Cade kissed her, slow and sweet. And when they pulled apart, he said, I'm not going anywhere, Alara. You're stuck with me now. Good, because I'm not letting you go. 3 months later, Alara made an announcement. She was stepping down as CEO of Meridian Global. The board tried to talk her out of it. The media went into a frenzy. But Alara didn't waver. I've spent 20 years building this company, she said at her final press conference, and I'm proud of what we've accomplished. But I've also learned that there's more to life than quarterly earnings and board meetings. I've learned that sometimes survival means letting go of what you thought you needed and holding on to what actually matters. She looked directly at the camera. I'm stepping down to focus on what's important: family, balance, living a life that's about more than just work. After the press conference, Cade was waiting for her outside the building. "How'd it go?" he asked. "Terrifying. Liberating. Both. Any regrets?" "Not one." They walked to his car together, hand in hand. "So what now?" Cade asked. "Now we build something new. Together." "What kind of something?" Ilara smiled. "I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out. One day at a time, one day at a time." 6 months after that, Ilara moved in with Cade and Emma. It wasn't a smooth transition. Emma had opinions about how Ilara folded towels. Ilara had opinions about Emma's refusal to eat vegetables. Cade had opinions about both of them leaving their shoes in the middle of the floor. But they made it work. They built routines, family dinners, movie nights, weekend trips to the beach where Emma would collect shells and Ilara would help her build sandcastles that never quite stayed standing. It wasn't perfect. They argued. They got frustrated. But they also laughed. They supported each other. They showed up. And slowly, they built something that felt like home. A year after the crash, Cade and Ilara went back to the island. Not the same island. That one was too remote, too dangerous to access without a full expedition. But a different one. Quieter. Safer. They brought Emma with them this time. They built a fire on the beach, cooked fish over the flames, and watched the sun set over the ocean. Emma ran along the shore, collecting shells and laughing, while Cade and Ilara sat side by side in the sand. "You ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't crashed?" Ilara asked. "Sometimes." "What do you think?" "I think you would have stayed in your office, and I would have stayed in my cubicle, and we never would have known each other." Ilara leaned her head on his shoulder. "That would have been a shame." "Yeah, it would have." They sat in silence for a while, watching Emma play. "I used to think survival was about control," Ilara said quietly. "About making sure nothing could hurt me." "But that's not survival. That's just existing." "What's survival then?" "Letting people in, even when it's scary, even when you might lose them." She looked at him. "You taught me that." Cade kissed the top of her head. "You taught me something too." "What's that?" "That it's okay to want more, to believe you deserve more." He smiled. "You taught me to fight for it." Ilara's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "We're quite a pair." "Yeah, we are." Emma ran up to them, breathless and excited. "Dad! Ilara, come look! I found a crab!" They got up and followed her down the beach, the three of them together, and Cade realized something. This was what survival looked like. Not just staying alive, but building a life worth living, with people worth loving, and he'd never been more grateful to have survived. 2 years after the crash, Cade and Ilara got married. It was a small ceremony, just family and close friends. Emma was the flower girl, and she took the job very seriously, making sure every petal was placed exactly right. When Cade and Ilara exchanged vows, they didn't use traditional words. Instead, they wrote their own. "I promise to keep showing up," Ilara said, her voice steady. "Even when it's hard, even when I'm scared, I promise to choose you every single day." Cade smiled. "I promise to fight for us, to never give up, no matter what. And I promise to love you, not just in survival mode, but in everything that comes after." They kissed, and Emma cheered louder than anyone else. At the reception, Cade's mom pulled him aside. "I'm proud of you, Schmidt," she said. "Thanks, Mom. You've built something good here, something real." "I know." She squeezed his hand. "Your dad would have been proud too." Cade's throat tightened. His dad had died when he was 12. A car accident, sudden and senseless. But he liked to think his mom was right, that somewhere, somehow, his dad was watching, and he was proud. "Thanks," he said again. Later that night, after the guests had gone home and Emma had fallen asleep on the couch, Cade and Ilara sat on the balcony of their new house. A modest place with a backyard where Emma could play, and enough room for all of them to breathe. "You happy?" Kate asked. Alara looked at him, her eyes bright. "Yeah, I really am." "Good, me too." They sat there in the quiet, holding hands, and watched the stars. And Cade thought about how far they'd come. From a burning plane to a deserted island to this, a life they'd built together, piece by piece, day by day. It hadn't been easy, it hadn't been perfect, but it had been worth it, every single moment, because survival wasn't just about making it through. It was about what you did after, the choices you made, the people you held on to, the life you built from the wreckage. And Cade had built something beautiful, with Alara, with Emma, with all the messy, complicated, imperfect pieces of himself he'd learned to accept. He'd survived, and more importantly, he'd learned how to live.